surplus. Senator
Thank you.
Booker?
Yeah, thank you very much for being here, Secretary Mayorkas. I want to thank you and the incredible professionals, thousands of work under your command, and thank them for their work and their dedication to our country. I want to start off by looking at the American food system, which is savagely broken. It's hurting everybody from driving record, incredible, staggering numbers of independent family farmers out of business. It's hurting the end users. We're a nation where just 2% of our ag subsidies go to fruits and vegetables, which we're told to eat the majority of. It's a system that's hurting everyone. But I want to zero in on what's happening with people who are food workers, many of them who are immigrants, many of them who are undocumented immigrants. In your opening statement, you said, a reference to an October 12th memo called Worksite Enforcement, and you said the strategy is to protect the American labor market, the conditions of the American worksite, and the dignity of the individual. I'm wondering just about the threat of deportation and how that's serving potentially as a deterrent to immigrant workers who might otherwise speak up about unsafe conditions. I know you're familiar with the Mississippi raids targeting poultry workers, for example. About 2 years ago, where 680 workers were swept up in those raids in the aftermath of a $3.75 million settlement with the EEOC, and their charges were everything from sexual harassment, discrimination, real exploitation of these immigrant workers. And so I guess the question I'd like to know is that as you focus on civil enforcement on these unscrupulous workers who are putting people almost in like slavery-like conditions, or at least undermining their dignity, what, if anything, can the DHS do to incentivize and encourage immigrant workers to report abuses in order to protect their rights and defend the labor standards of everyone?
Senator, thank you so much for raising this issue. We've spent a considerable amount of energy focused on it. We have promulgated a suite of policies to get at the very heart of the issue that you have raised. Number one, you referenced our worksite enforcement policy, which focuses on the unscrupulous employers that exploit the vulnerabilities of those unlawfully present in the United States. We also promulgated a policy that our immigration enforcement tools cannot be used in retaliation for the assertion of workplace rights. Third, we promulgated a policy extending to individuals who do assert their rights deferred action or other tools so that they can actually advance their interests, advance their rights without fear of removal from the United States. We have a suite of measures.
And what, can you be more specific about that? So in other words, if I come forward to report outrageous abuses from sexual harassment and violations to unsafe working conditions, my fear would be that I would be immediately deported or taken into custody.
So there are two aspects to that. Number one, you might fear your removal just by dint of the fact that you're unlawfully present in the United States. And that's precisely why the September 30th guidelines that I promulgated indicated that unlawful presence in and of itself is not a basis for immigration enforcement action, but rather we have to prioritize public safety, national security, and border security as the priority areas, number one. Number two, you might fear retaliation by reason of your assertion of rights, and we have called upon our DHS personnel to evaluate a case based on the facts and circumstances and determine whether we should extend deferred action, which does not provide the individual with status, but lawful presence, so that they do not need to fear removal despite our policies, and they could advance their rights and vindicate those rights and hold the unscrupulous employer accountable without fear of removal.
I'm grateful for that. Could you just correct something for me? A lot of my Republican colleagues have been critical of the Biden administration's handling of the situation at the border, as you know. But, you know, in reality, monthly encounters at the southwest border started rising dramatically a year and a half ago under the Trump administration. This increase was due in part to worsening economic conditions resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. That's true, correct?
Yes, it is.
And can you talk about that increase that started significantly under the Trump administration and often being driven by this pandemic?
So if I may, Senator, 2019 brought incredibly high numbers of encounters at the border, and much has been said this morning about the purported pull factors. But the fact of the matter is we have to take a look at why people leave their homes, why they flee violence, why they flee economic desperation, why they flee the disasters that result from climate change.
Right, and so this politicization of it, putting it all at one foot of one president over another, to me seems not to really be indicative of what the real problem is that began to be seen under the Trump administration, correct?
That's right, and that is exactly why.
And can I interrupt you? I'm so sorry. I've got 1 minute left. I want to try to get two quick questions in. There's been an expulsion of migrants under Title 42, which was the Trump administration. I think they called it the Stephen Miller special, where they were trying to use a COVID excuse just to expel, to remove people. Is the administration considering rescinding what, again, the Trump administration official, one Trump administration official called the Stephen Miller special, especially given that the Center for Disease Control and Prevention resisted Trump's administration's attempts to issue that order in the first place, being that it was unnecessary?
Senator, the CDC conducted an independent study with respect to the Title 42 authority. It determined that the public health imperative required its continued use. The Delta variant was a very significant reason.
So you're listening to the CDC as guidance for making your decisions?
It is a CDC authority, and
then real quick, the plan to provide COVID-19 vaccines to detained migrants was overruled, according to the Washington Post. I want to see if this report is true. According to the Washington Post, the plan to provide COVID-19 vaccines to detained migrants was overruled by the White House with a specific intent to deter immigration and asylum seeking. Is that true?
That is not. We offer vaccinations to individuals in ICE custody. We do not mandate it.
All right, and I'm going to submit to you a question on the expulsion of Haitian nationals for the record, and just appreciate your time. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Senator Blackburn.